Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're a language teacher, you already know the deal. Sparking and sustaining student motivation can feel like the hardest part of the job, right? Well, today, we're going to dig into the research to build a really practical framework for exactly that, how to build a motivational fire that doesn't just fizzle out.
So let's just get right into it. Why is this so tough? It's a question teachers have been asking for like over 100 years. So if you're feeling this challenge, you are definitely not alone. The struggle to get students engaged is one of the most common issues in, well, all of education. And this isn't just a feeling, you know? The data backs this up. One classic study found that for new teachers, motivating students was the #2 most serious difficulty they faced. Think about that. It's seen as even more challenging than mastering different teaching methods or even knowing the subject inside and out. It's that fundamental. Okay, so to really tackle this, we're going to walk through it step by step. First, we'll unpack the motivation puzzle itself. Then, we'll talk about laying the groundwork, setting the stage. After that, it's all about igniting that initial spark, keeping the fire burning, and making sure we finish strong. And the grand finale? Empowering our students to become their own source of motivation.
First up, the motivation puzzle. It is so important to get this. Motivation isn't some on-off switch you can just flip. Nope. It's this complex mix of different drives, social pressures, and it's totally unique to every single classroom. What works for one group might completely bomb with another, which is why we need a flexible toolkit, not some magic bullet.
And this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. Unlike a hobby someone picks up because they love it, school is compulsory. Students are learning things they didn't choose, their performance is constantly graded, and they're in this social arena where making a mistake can feel, well, humiliating. That whole context makes sparking natural, genuine motivation a real uphill battle from the get-go.
All right, let's get practical. Our first big step is laying the groundwork, because before you try any cool strategy or fun activity, you have to create the right conditions first. I mean, you can't build a fire on wet ground, right? So what does that mean? Well, researchers point to 3 things that are totally non-negotiable. These aren't just nice-to-haves, they are the absolute foundation. It all comes down to creating a sense of safety and community. That means how you act and relate to your students, the overall vibe of the classroom, and how the students treat each other. And the research on this is crystal clear. One huge study looked at all sorts of classrooms and found that while the teaching styles were all over the place, the one constant thing in every single motivated classroom was a positive teacher-student relationship. It really does all start right there. Okay, so once that groundwork is solid, you've got your dry kindling ready to go. Now we can move on to the fun part, igniting the spark. This is all about actively generating that first burst of interest and buy-in, especially for those students who don't exactly walk in the door buzzing with excitement. To create this spark, research points to 5 key areas. You've got to tackle the why, making them see the value in the language, and also the how, making them believe that they can actually succeed. Of course, this means setting clear goals and making the material relevant to their lives. But there's this one crucial step that often gets missed, managing their expectations by talking about their deep-down beliefs about learning itself. And that last point is so interesting because unrealistic beliefs are like little motivational time bombs. Students who believe myths like you have to be born with a talent for languages. Well, a tool like the Bali can actually help you find out what those beliefs are, talk about them, and basically diffuse that potential for disappointment before it ever has a chance to go off.
Okay, so you've laid the groundwork, you've lit the spark. Fantastic. But we all know language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. So our next section is all about keeping the fire burning. Because that initial excitement, it's gonna fade. That's natural. It needs active maintenance.
Just think about it this way. A really boring, systematic class might get students to pass a test, sure, but it's probably not going to inspire a lifelong passion. For learning that actually sticks around long-term, the whole experience has to be enjoyable. Making things stimulating and fun isn't just fluff. It's a core strategy for keeping that fire going.
And the other huge part of maintenance is protecting your students' psychological well-being. A language classroom can feel incredibly vulnerable. You're asking people to make mistakes in front of their peers. So we have to nurture their self-esteem, build their confidence, and create a space where it's truly okay to mess up. That means no public call-outs that could be humiliating, and always looking for ways to let every single student have a moment to shine.
Next up, finishing strong.
You know, the way students feel about what they've just done has a massive impact on their motivation for what comes next, and how they explain their own successes and failures to themselves. That's something we as teachers can really influence.
This is where something called attribution theory is just so powerful. Look, if a student fails and thinks it's because they're just bad at languages, something they feel is fixed, that's devastating for motivation. But if they think it's because they didn't put in enough effort, well, that's something they can change next time. Our feedback should always push them toward blaming a lack of effort, not a lack of ability.
And we have to be super careful with grades. I know they seem like a motivator, but they can trigger what's called the mini-max principle. Basically, students get so laser-focused on getting the best grade with the least amount of work that they completely lose sight of, actually learning. The reward system can sometimes totally distract from the whole point of the task.
And all of this brings us to the final and, I think, most important stage, empowering the learner. Because no matter how amazing a teacher is, the reality is most language learning happens outside the classroom. So the real goal is to help students become the masters of their own motivation.
A teacher's direct influence is, when you think about it, pretty limited. So the most powerful thing we can possibly do is to help our students become more autonomous, to help them self-regulate. We need to give them the tools to keep their own fire burning when we're not there to do it for them. And a really powerful way to do this is by helping them build a vision of their ideal L2 self. It starts with imagination, getting them to create this vivid picture of the person they want to become through this language. Then, you help them make that vision real by setting up a step-by-step action plan and finding ways to keep it top of mind. This process literally transforms a fuzzy dream into a concrete and incredibly powerful motivational tool. So let's just quickly recap the big ideas here. Remember, motivation isn't a one-time thing. It is a process you have to build. That process always starts with your relationship with your students. It needs to be actively maintained with engaging stuff to do. How students think about their own performance is critical. And the ultimate goal, the end game, is always student autonomy, so they can carry that fire themselves. Which really just leaves us with this final thought. Maybe the most important question we can ask ourselves as teachers isn't just, how do I motivate my students, but instead, how do I shift my entire teaching practice to help my students learn how to motivate themselves? Because that is the change that creates learners for life.